Hi, this is Jerry Jewell. You are listening to TV Confidential.
Ed Robertson welcoming you back to TV Confidential, a radio talk show about television that is pleased to welcome Tony Award and Emmy Award nominated actress Charlotte Rae. Most of you think of Charlotte Rae as Mrs. Garrett on The Facts of Life, and before that, Diff'rent Strokes, as well as Schnauzer's wife on Car 54, Where Are You, and Molly the Mail Carrier on Sesame Street. What is sometimes overlooked is the long list of stage credits in Charlotte's career, both on and off Broadway, including Lil Abner, Threepenny Opera, Come Back Little Sheba, Pippin, Romeo and Juliet, and dozens and dozens and dozens of others. What is most remarkable, however, is that as often as Charlotte has made us laugh, she often did so in the face of great personal trauma, including the uncertainty of raising a son with autism at a time when very few medical experts knew anything about it. It is all part of the arc of Charlotte's life, which she shares for the first time in a new book, which we'll tell you more about in just a second. But first, Charlotte Rae, welcome to TV Confidential.
Thank you, Ed. I'm glad to be here.
I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed your book.
Oh, I'm so glad. That makes me very happy.
Well, I've read a number of memoirs, and I've had an opportunity to work on a number of memoirs, and it's always tricky because even though you're a real person, you have to think of yourself in dramatic form. You have to think in terms of story arc and concurring storylines, and you have to think of the people of your life in character. You had no problem, at least I'm guessing you had no problem doing that because, as you show us in the very beginning, I mean, you overcame a lot of stuff, being a good wife and being a mom, and it's like it's as if all your accomplishments were secondary because you were trying your best to be a good person and raise a family and look out for your children.
Yeah, that's true. My surviving son is a writer, and he insisted on doing this book. He said, "Ma, you're 89 and a half." And he's written books. They've been published. And he said, I want to do your memoirs with you. And so that's why we did it. And I just decided that I'd let it all hang out because, it's not like it's a career move. It's just wanting to pass on what my life was. It was not like Mrs. Garrett. It was a real life with real live moment-to-moment experiences like everybody, and I wanted them to know I was like everybody.
Yes, and you certainly did. In fact, we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording. One of the papers I read every week, their book section has a feature called Grabbers, where they post the first sentences of new books. You have a great grabber, because your first sentence, the first sentence of your book, which is called The Facts of My Life, the first sentence, you let the reader know exactly where you're coming from. It is not about you as a performer. It is a book about you as a mom, as a wife, as a sister, as a family member, as a person who faces many of the things that we all face, but without any fanfare.
My son who wrote it, Larry, he hopped right to it, didn't he?
It captures who you are because you have always been other-oriented. You knew you wanted to be a performer from a young age, but you learned early on to think in terms of others because others were very generous to you, and that comes across in every page of the book.
Oh, yes, absolutely. God's angels, God's little angels, I tell you, all through my life. And I hope I've been their angels, some people. I've tried to be.
Well, you certainly have. The term pay it forward has become very popular in the last 10 or 15 years, and there are many examples where someone showed kindness to you, both professionally and personally. Like for example, Eartha Kitt, who you worked with early in your career in New York, when you're singing in clubs in New York. I mean, you shared a bill with Eartha Kitt, and you shared a dressing room with Eartha Kitt.
Right.
And because you're starting off, I mean, you don't think of yourself as a star. You're thinking to yourself, I'm lucky to be able to do this for a living. Mm-hmm. And she taught you a lesson about don't undervalue yourself. So
yes,
you know,
she did. She did. And not only Eartha Kitt, but a long time ago, I did something on television, a big production of The World of Sholem Aleichem
mm-hmm.
for public broadcasting, and Nancy Walker scolded me because she said the same thing. Don't underrate yourself. You're just one of the gang. We're all in it together, all of us actors. And so, yeah, the generosity of people that I've worked with has been most supportive. I mean, the world's been wonderful to me. I mean, the people in it, I'm just so grateful. And I guess I'm just a lucky duck.
Well, you're a lucky duck, and we're lucky to be sharing some time with Charlotte Rae. Charlotte Rae, Mrs. Garrett, on the facts of life and different strokes. Charlotte's new book, which she co-authored with her son Larry Strauss, is called The Facts of My Life, which will be available everywhere beginning November 1st through Bear Manor Media. You can pre-order it by going to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and wherever books are sold online. For our listeners on the East Coast, Charlotte, she has an appearance coming up at Sardi's Restaurant in New York on Tuesday, November 3rd. And for our listeners on the West Coast, Charlotte will be appearing at the Barnes & Noble at the Grove at the Farmers Market section of Los Angeles on Wednesday, November 11th. We will post all that information on our website, tvconfidential.net. You mentioned your son Larry co-wrote the book with you and pushed you to write the book. Larry's a character in the book, in that we see his struggles as a person, and then, on the other side of, as you mentioned, he's a successful writer, and he also teaches public school in New York. I mean, teaching public school, that's tough, because, that's...
No, he teaches it in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay, well, we'll fix that.
In South Central, where most of his students are African-American or Latino, and he's worked very hard with them, very hard to help them get scholarships to college, and he's very supportive and helpful to them, and I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, and my point is, a public school, that's really where you work hard, and you often get your best results, because you're often working with budgeted limitations, so your skills as a teacher really come to the fore.
Yeah, that's true. Yep, I'm proud of him.
Your son Andy is also one of the concurrent storylines in your book. As we mentioned in our open, he was born autistic at a time when nobody knew what the word autistic meant.
No, we didn't. And I mean, like, for example, when we knew something was wrong, and we went to an excellent diagnostician, and when he said autistic, I thought, oh, thank God, he's artistic.
Yeah.
I almost sank to my knees in gratitude to God. I had no idea what autism was or autistic was, and I had no idea. We loved Andy. We loved him and struggled with him and worked with him, laughed with him, cried about him. He lived until he was he was a few days before 45. He passed of a heart congestion.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he was wonderful, and he was a challenge, and I miss him. I love him.
Yes, he was a challenge, and he lives with you every day. And I could hear your heart. I could hear your heart speak when you say that, Charlotte. And again, this goes back to something we talked about earlier. It's you learn a lot about. I mean, you're a big believer in perspective is everything. And when you face the challenge of raising a child with autism, any knocks that you face in your career or any disappointments, and we all have disappointments in our professional career, they don't become as big. They become little things when you think about the big things, which is family.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. Perspective. Yep.
Perspective is everything. We're talking to Charlotte Rae, Mrs. Garrett, on The Facts of Life, Schnauzer's wife on Car 54, Where Are You?, and an actress who has worked with such legends as Meryl Streep, George Clooney, Gene Stapleton, Larry Hagman, Alice Ghostley, Stacy Keach, Paul Lynde, Julie Newmar, Tina Louise, Eartha Kitt, Dick Cavett, Kevin Kline, Angela Lansbury, and Charles Nelson Riley. The Facts of My Life will be available everywhere beginning November 1st. You can order it right now through Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, BearManorMedia.com, and wherever books are sold online. One of the themes of your book, at least I recognized it as a common theme, common thread as I read The Facts of My Life, Charlotte. You did a number of plays throughout your career, not only before your success on Diff'rent Strokes and Facts of Life in the 70s, but also at other points of your career. You did a number of plays that were either ahead of their time or that closed early for one reason or another, and for reasons beyond your control. And yet that didn't seem to have any impact on your career because you always found work. Whereas when you do a TV show or a film, if the film does not do well, there's sort of a stigma that stays with the actor that didn't seem to be the case with you on stage. And is that true with stage life in general, or am I reading too much into that?
Well, I've never analyzed it, Ed. I just kept bopping along and kept, auditioning or whatever, and kept going. I don't know. I never thought of it, really. Well, I'm sorry. An answer.
No. That's in saying you never thought of it. That's the perfect answer, because you were you had enough going on at the time with your family, moving from one thing or another. You don't have time to think about it. You just keep moving on. But you're a rarity, because other than the time you worked at your father's shop in Wisconsin, you pretty much have worked nonstop as a singer on stage or later in film and television. Not many actors can say that.
I know. I'm very, very lucky. And I love doing it. I feel like I'm God's little sunbeam. And I like, when I entertain or when I'm doing comedy, it just makes me feel good because I'm making people get out of themselves and laugh. But I love doing serious things. From my own personal experience, I have plenty of a well of emotion there, and I've done some wonderful roles that I've enjoyed, like Come Back, Little Sheba. I don't want to do a monologue about what I did, but I did do Samuel Beckett's play. It's called Happy Days, which is not like the series.
That's correct.
It's a woman who's stuck in a mound of something or other up to her waist, and the second act is up to her neck. And she's a noble soul, and she struggles through it, always trying to be cheerful and positive. I got wonderful reviews for it in the LA Times, and I'm very proud of. And then they took me to New York to do it at CSC, and it got great reviews. And so I really, and I did Shakespeare in the Park, and all, The Nurse in Romeo and Juliet, and Mistress Quickly and Henry IV, Part 1, Part 2. So, I feel very excited and very grateful that I've had a wide range of acting experience to do.
We're talking to Charlotte Rae, Mrs. Garrett, on The Facts of Life, and the co-author, along with her son, Larry Strauss, of The Facts of My Life. We'll continue our conversation with Charlotte after this quick time out here on TV Confidential.
Hi, this is Fred Wayne. You're listening to TV Confidential.
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum. What might be right for you may not be right for some. A man is born, he's a man of means. Then along come two, they got nothing but the genes.
Ed Robertson, along with our guest, Charlotte Rae, Mrs. Garrett, on The Facts of Life, and the co-author, along with her son, Larry Strauss of The Facts of My Life, the story of how Charlotte rose from humble beginnings in Wisconsin to great heights on stage, screen, and of course, television, while often in the face of great personal trauma, including facing and overcoming alcoholism and, later, a bout with pancreatic cancer, as well as the uncertainty of raising a son with autism at a time when very few people knew anything about it. The Facts of My Life will be available everywhere beginning November 1st. You can order it right now, though, through Amazon.com, BarnesNoble.com, Bear, Manor, Media.com, and wherever books are sold online. One of my favorite lines in the book is when you talk about your early days. You did a lot of you did a lot of live television, particularly when you were in New York. And one of my favorite lines in the book is when you talk about, on the one hand, it's unfortunate that very few of those live performances have been preserved so that they're available to the public. But at the same time, and I'm quoting you, it's kind of nice that they're not available because they belong only to us, the people who made them.
Well, yeah. Well, you read it in the book how when I was pregnant, we had done so many run-throughs of Appointment with Adventure that I thought I was finished. And I said goodbye to everybody, and they wished me good luck with the baby. And Joe Papp, who was the head of, founded Shakespeare in the Park,
yeah.
and the Public Theater, he hugged me. He was an AD at the time. And I walked out to Fifth Avenue and was hailing a cab. And he panicked. He ran out and said, "We got one more scene." And I had to run back. And the poor woman who was opposite me, she was looking everywhere for me, in drawers and closets. I finally showed up, and we finished the scene. I mean, that was... nothing could be done.
Nothing could be done, but I've had the good fortune of talking to many people such as you who worked in the days of live television, and, that little mishap, that was not uncommon because, you're doing it live, and it was as close to doing it on stage as it could be.
Yes.
Except on stage you don't have all the cameras blaring in front of you and all the cables and whatnot, so... But there's sort of a charm to those mishaps because it humanizes the whole thing, and it shows that you were doing it at a time when this new medium was just starting, and that kind of made it exciting.
Yeah, well, I remember the name of the darling woman who played opposite me in that scene, Sheila Bond. Mm-hmm. I just want to give her credit. Okay.
You went to Northwestern University, and you had some very famous classmates, one of whom was Paul Lynde.
Yeah, Paul. He was really something. He's a big, tall guy, and I'm a little short girl. And we sat next to each other because my maiden name is Labatsky, and his name is Lynde. So when we were in the theater classes, we always sat next to each other, and we became chums. And then our sophomore year, we played opposite each other in the musical. Once a year they had a musical, and we always had the lead in the comedy sketches. And then they gave me a song to sing. I'll tell you about that later. But he wrote the sketches, some of them. He was very funny man, and we did well together, very well. And we were the hit of the campus. Labatsky and Lynde, they used to call us. And when I came to California, he had a sitcom on, and he asked me to play in a couple of them. And he was a very naughty man.
Yes.
I mean, he could be very. Can I say this word, bitchy?
Yes, you can say this word.
And I got to tell you, I'm going to tell this everywhere because you know why? Because even though it's malicious, it's funny, and, he's gone, and just so that people know what a wit he was, he did a movie with Doris Day, who's still alive and wonderful. She's up north here in Northern California with all of her lovely animals she loves and everything. She's a terrific lady. But he said, because, a lot of people do, when they get a little older, the women want to have a little gauze put over the camera.
Yeah.
It softens the way they look.
Yes, yes.
Well, Paul said they had to shoot her through a Navajo rug. He let Paul, wherever you are, you're still getting a laugh.
Yes. Well, look, when I watch some of the things he did on TV, whether it's or even Hollywood Squares, which is, some would say that's where he was at his best, because he was thinking a lot of those things on the spot. I mean, he was a very, very funny man, and I know it troubled him. I think, at least from what I understand, it troubled him that he never quite found the right vehicle on television that really served him the best.
Well, the sitcom that they gave him was not right for him. They had him happily married with a couple of kids. That wasn't right. I mean, he was not that kind of character. And it's too bad they didn't find the right thing for him.
They didn't find the right thing for him, but one of the more touching moments in your book, The Facts of My Life, Charlotte, is when you not only went to college with Paul, but there were times when you lived together, particularly during the early days in New York, and Paul came out to you. Now, then again, this is no secret. I mean, this is no secret that Paul was gay in real life. But the fact that he came out to you at that point in his career, very early on, it showed that he trusted you, and it showed that you had a very, very close friendship.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. God bless him.
We're talking to Charlotte Rae, Mrs. Garrett, on The Facts of Life, Schnauzer's wife on Car 54. Where are you? And an actress who has worked with such legends as Meryl Streep, George Clooney, Gene Stapleton, Larry Hagman, Alice Ghostley, Stacy Keach, Paul Lynde, Julie Newmar, Tina Louise, Eartha Kitt, Dick Cavett, Kevin Kline, Angela Lansbury, and Charles Nelson Raleigh. Charlotte shares many great stories of her life on stage, screen, and television in a new book called The Facts of My Life, which will be available November 1st through Bear Manor Media. For more information, go to bearmanormedia.com. For our listeners on the East Coast, Charlotte Rae will be signing copies of The Facts of My Life at legendary Sardi's Restaurant in New York City on Tuesday, November 3rd. For our listeners on the West Coast, Charlotte will be signing copies of The Facts of My Life at the Barnes & Noble at the Grove in Los Angeles on Wednesday, November 11th. Another colleague that you worked with on stage and who became a good friend, through the end of his life was Larry Hagman. And
I loved him. Oh, I'll tell you, he loved life.
Yes, he did.
He just embraced it and hugged everybody. He was big. He was from Texas originally. He was raised by his father. Mm-hmm. And he married someone, a wonderful woman who was at least 4 years older. And he said, "Oh, I love her so much. She's like my mommy." Mm-hmm. I mean, the mommy he never had.
Yes.
And they were so full of fun, and we had so much fun when we did that play together. We became buddies, and Mai was very, very good. I mean, when they didn't have much money, I mean, she would take sheets and make curtains and drapes and bedspreads out of them, sheets. I mean, she was a wonderful cook. She'd plug her little electric frying pan or whatever it was in the hotel room when we were out of town before we opened with the play.
That was when you were both doing Pajama Game, right?
No.
Oh, no, that's it.
The beauty part.
That's it.
And the beauty part, the sad part about the beauty part was we had better reviews than Picnic. Mm. But the newspaper strike came. The newspaper strike, and the producers didn't have enough money to advertise on television and the paper. And we all took cuts, and it eventually just closed. Nobody knew where we were because we switched theaters. We only had that theater for about 2 weeks, and then we were contracted to move to a different theater. So nobody knew where we were. There were no newspapers to find out, and on television or radio, nothing. And we closed, And it was wonderful. Larry was great. Bert Lahr was great. Everyone was great in it. Oh, Alice Ghostley. Oh, the wonderful, brilliant people. Well, what can I tell you?
I understand that Larry made a fresh pot of coffee for you and the rest of the cast members every night.
Oh, yes. I'll tell you, there were 2 star dressing rooms.
Mm-hmm.
One for Bert Lahr. Remember, the Cowardly Lion.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant comedian. And there was another star dressing room. And they wanted Alice Ghostley and me to share it. And Alice wanted to be alone. And she wanted to go upstairs. She didn't want... I said, take the dressing room. I'll go upstairs. And because her billing was a little before mine.
Mm-hmm.
We both had co-star, but... And she said, no. I'll go upstairs. I really... So Larry came up to me and said, I'm on the stage all the time, from the beginning of the first act to the end of the last act. And, Char, could I share the dressing room? I've got all these quick changes. And I said, of course. And he brought a big electric pot and made chock full of nuts coffee every night. And Bert Lahr's dresser, Earl, would come in for a mug with a cup of coffee, to get a cup of coffee. And, we had such a jolly old time. It was so good.
I had a chance to talk to a number of the of his castmates on Dallas, and he did much the same thing, especially in the early stages of that show. He had a knack for bringing people together, Larry.
Yes. He just had a wonderful love of people and love of life and everything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he just had such a joy. And what a wonderful gift that was. And, you know, later on when he had that transplant on his liver,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote him a note. And, I mean, I was just so grateful that he could live. And, you know, I mean, he had a drinking problem. We both did. We were drinking like lords in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Not before, never before performance. Always jolly drinking afterwards.
Yeah.
But I guess he drank more than I did, or what? Who knows?
Well, you were able to control it, and you were able to take steps and take back control of your life. And you talk about that in The Facts of My Life, which is the name of Charlotte's new book, which she co-authored with her son Larry Strauss, and which is available through BearManorMedia.com, BarnesNoble.com, Amazon, and wherever books are sold. Online. One of the other people that you spent a lot of time with, both professionally, and you roomed together, I understand, when you first moved out to Los Angeles, was Charles Nelson Reilly. That's another talented man.
Oh, a wonderful talent. He was more than funny. I mean, funny is very important.
Mm-hmm.
But he also directed many plays with Julie Harris,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, he was a fine director as well. And he taught with Uta Hagen at her school, and he wanted me to teach there when he moved to California, and I was still living in New York. He wanted me to teach singing for actors who wanted to maybe do a musical, and I just never got around to doing it, but I felt honored that he thought I could do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, sometimes, Charlotte, when it's late at night and I need to decompress and there's nothing on television,
Yeah.
I will go on YouTube or I'll go on the game show channel and I'll watch reruns of the Match Game, and Charles makes me laugh 40 years later. That's how.
Oh, that's wonderful. I was staying at his house,
Mm-hmm.
and they called me. The agent called me and had them call me, the Match Game people, and they said, we'd like you to appear on the Match Game. I said, I'm not good at games, but I'm staying with Charles Nelson Reilly, and he'd be wonderful. And he certainly was. Yeah.
He certainly was, and it's wonderful talking to Charlotte Rae. And Charlotte's book is The Facts of My Life, which is available everywhere through BearBannerMedia.com, Amazon.com, and BarnesandNoble.com. You mentioned your maiden name was Labotsky.
Yes.
You changed your name to Charlotte Rae after meeting Burr Tillstrom.
Yeah, that was many years ago when I was still in college. I was just champing at the bit to get to be an actor, and I would go down to CBS, and I got a job on Pepper Young's Family, and so Burl said, well, what's your middle name? I said, Rae. That's it, said Charlotte Rae. So that was it. And my dad was hurt, very hurt. Very hurt. He didn't understand. He said, Charlotte, Labotsky is a good name. I mean, everybody knows that I'm a good man and I don't do anything that isn't honorable. And he was very hurt. And I felt so badly about that. And then when I was looking for material, when I was going to go back into the Blue Angel, which was a very, very, very elegant supper club in the 50s,
Shelley Bourbon.
I said, would you write me some stuff? He said, well, tell me some things from your life. So I told him about my father and how he felt. And he never wrote anything for me, but he used that himself. But God bless him. I'm glad that it made him happy and made other people happy. But I never had that wonderful, touching moment with... Charles Nelson Riley, he was wonderful. He had a little dog named Rosie, and he went out to do Music Man in San Diego. So I took care of Rosie, and when I was here, I was still living in New York. He introduced me to so many people, and I never stopped working. I did Shirley Jones, her show.
Yes, you did The Partridge Family. You did Love American Style. You did pretty much every major sitcom in the early '70s, and then you were doing a play with Gene Stapleton around the time you first started doing All in the Family.
Oh, I was in awe of them. Oh, Gene Stapleton was a beautiful, beautiful soul. A beautiful actor, but a beautiful soul. I loved her. And she had my sisters who had visited me and me over for lunch at her house. And both of us went to Chicago with Phil Donahue and his wife, Marlo Thomas, to March for Women. You know, women should make as much money as men when they have a job. And a very fine artist. And, I tell you, I was so nervous. It was Coast to Coast, All in the Family, which was the #1 show, which we all loved so much. And they all looked at me because I was so nervous. And Sally Struthers and Gene and Rob Reiner, they looked at me and said, don't you know how good you are? I mean, they were in absolute wonderment that I was terrified. But that's the way it was. I'm always very honest. When I did that film with Meryl Streep.
Ricky and the Flash.
Yeah. I took her aside because I knew I could because of the way she is. And I said, I'm scared. I mean, I have such a small part in this movie, and you all know each other, and you all are so entangled with each other and know each other so well. And she told me about an experience she had, which was very similar. And she reassured me that she understood. And I don't know, that she commiserated with me was extraordinary.
Well, it just goes, again, this goes back to one of the very first things we talked about when we started our conversation, Charlotte, I mean, no matter what you've done or how much you've accomplished, the fact that the fact that you get nervous before a performance, it shows that you're human. It shows that you don't rest on your laurels. You want to get this next role right.
I guess.
Well,
anyway, she was wonderful, and she was just one of us, one of the gang, not Stella Star.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, you're very much one of us. Talking to you, when you read Charlotte's book, folks, you will think of her as a real person. You know, just sharing her story, and it's a wonderful book, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Charlotte. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Ed, you've been a wonderful interviewer. I love talking to you.
Charlotte Rae is the author, along with her son Larry Strauss, of The Facts of My Life, the story of Charlotte's life and career on stage, screen, and television. The Facts of My Life will be available everywhere beginning November 1st. You can order it right now, though, by going to Amazon.com, BarnesNoble.com, BearManorMedia.com, and wherever books are sold online.